In this episode, we're talking about Michele de Montaigne, which we will refer to as Montaigne because we're terrible at French accents. Montaigne is credited with inventing the essay, so if you felt stabby when you found out that all of your major academic testing would be in the form of short essays, you can thank him. Montaigne believed that intellect is far more important than knowledge. He saw knowledge as a discipline of memorization, but intellect as creating the filter of understanding that is unique to each person. In his essay on friendship, he explores the many reasons that only men can be friends, and you'll probably have only one in your entire life. Famous for popularizing the phrase, "What do I know?" we'll be approaching this same question this week on From What We've Gathered with Danny Nelson and Kylie Shahar.
In the land of teeter totters, I prefer a slide. Turbulent or gentle waters, let's go for a ride.
What do we know? Kylie,
Danny.
scenario.
Yes.
I know you love scenarios.
I love a good scenario.
Let's do it.
Or a bad one.
Your partner comes home from whatever, something that they went, a conference that they went to. They excitedly tell you about their new friend. They're so excited they made this new friend. They share common interests. They went and played a sport together. I was going to say basketball, but literally, I don't know anyone. Maybe there's some croquet on the lawn but they had a good time. They share fashion, just like they're like, "Oh, I love Adidas too," whatever it is. And you're like, "Yes, go get it. I love that you found a new friend." And then they're like, it was the opposite sex person. It was a girl. In our case, we're both with men.
Yeah.
But he's like, it's a lady. Do your feelings change?
Well, first of all, it would be about barefoot shoes, not Adidas shoes. I just had to make that clarification.
Of course.
But I don't know. I mean, is it odd to say no?
I don't feel like it's odd to say no.
Yeah, I don't think that would make me feel any different or less excited about my partner's new friend. Just in virtue of it being of the opposite sex.
Right.
But that says a lot about
you and your relationship
exactly.
and your things. And I would say for me, I would be so excited that my husband was making friends that I would not care if it was a fictional person.
You're like, oh, it's a Martian.
I'm like,
cool.
You went through the trouble of making up a friend?
Making up. Yeah.
I'd be like, let's do it.
Completely fabricating.
That's by virtue of
other things
that may be happening.
Exactly.
I think, though, in society in general, we're unusual in that way.
Yes. Yeah.
And so on this episode, we're approaching the question of, can men and women be friends? And what are some philosophical thoughts on that idea of men and women being friends?
Yeah.
And for this week, we're setting that up with a philosopher from the 1500s, a 16th century philosopher, Montaigne. And here's some really fun things about Montaigne as we're talking about him.
Yes.
Number one, not only his dad was like, when he found out his wife was pregnant, he's like, I am making a plan for how this child is going to be brought up in a intellectual way. That included him going and living with peasants for like until he was a toddler, like his toddler years.
And he's coming from like a well-to-do family.
Yes.
Right.
He's coming from a rich family, a rich French family. Yeah. And so he's like, first of all, he's going to go so that he understands the salt of the earth in a personal way. Secondly, I'm going to make Latin a dead language. Even in the 16th century, Latin was already a dead language. His like, I am going to make this his first language, Latin.
That's tough.
So he brought in tutors. He brought in servants. He made him and his wife only speak to Montaigne in Latin until it was his first language. And then he started peppering in other languages, including his primary tutor didn't even speak French. So there was no way his tutor would ever use French, which everyone where they lived spoke French.
Exactly.
So not only that, he would be like, okay, now his tutor was German, I think. He's like, now we're going to introduce what would be considered ancient Greek activities for him to kind of bring his mind to this kind of like place where he could meditate over these ideas. And okay, so this is already a very strange childhood.
For sure.
Imagine all of this is accompanied by a troubadour, a musical performer that is with him at all times when he is studying or doing meditations or whatever. He has a permanent soundtrack as if
my goodness.
his dad was like making him a mixtape every day.
Yeah, or like he's on a sitcom or something. Exactly. Imagine they have a laugh track behind him. He does something embarrassing. Everybody's just laughing at him.
I think Montaigne would like that, actually.
I think that fits with his father's like plan for how to strengthen and toughen his constitution, right? Like, we're just gonna have people follow you around and laugh at your mistakes. That ought to toughen you up.
That'll toughen you up. But he would be like, excellent.
Yeah, totally.
I too love to laugh.
Yeah, exactly.
Me and Democritus, the smiling philosopher, like we're the same. And so he had this really kind of odd upbringing. And part of that, I mean, that really comes out in his essays because he invented the form of essay, which is at its fundamental, would you say, I think an essay to me is taking an idea and committing your personal thoughts about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And an informal essay.
Yeah.
I guess formal essays.
Yeah.
They have a structure.
Right.
Whereas but would you would say this is like a way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a way to, right. I think even with a formal essay, you could, there's a way to really systematically kind of lay out what you see are the building blocks to some idea that you're trying to get your reader to agree to or just understand. And so I think that in that style of writing too, formal or not, you could build these blocks of this argument with using your own, while using at the same time your own kind of personal thoughts or views on the matter. Maybe you're trying to develop your own view about something.
Yep.
And you're putting it in essay form, kind of building the blocks of this argument kind of one step at a time, laying the foundation, and then kind of positing ultimately what you're thinking about this subject or topic.
And I think that is a great kind of description of what Montaigne is doing, and that this was a complete new literary form. Yeah. When he actually was alive, there were many people who were like, well, these aren't scholastic documents because they're too anecdotal. Yeah. They're very free form. Sometimes he's like talking about friendship and then he's telling 3 stories about farming.
Right.
He's like, so he kind of has this way where his mind is going all different directions. And he also spends a lot of times within his essays quoting ancient philosophers.
Yeah.
And which is funny because he is so much like intellect is not about memorization, but you can't posit with Montaigne. This is his personal translations.
Yeah.
These aren't him finding someone else who are translating. So to him, it's also a way to convey like, oh my gosh, you probably haven't heard this really great joke from Plutarch. And everyone's like, that is correct.
Yeah, we haven't.
Because we're not reading his manuscripts in a dead language like you are. Exactly. But he's like, he got a good one on this one. And so he like, because he has such an unusual upbringing, he does have this almost playful way of interacting with people, and it's one of the reasons that his writings have endured, because even now you can go and read them and you feel like, oh, this is still a good one.
Right. Yeah.
This is still like, even this story, even though I have no idea what a 16th century French farming village, I can still enjoy the story.
For sure. Yeah, there are some little good little nuggets in there where which make you like chuckle, and you're like, okay, that's that might be unusual coming to a 16th century.
Like rich.
Yeah.
Kind of like, and if you see photos of like, or photos. There were no photos. I mean, let's ask AI. Travel back in time. Make me some photos. He was like very fashionable.
Yeah.
He wasn't.
Yeah.
Like he was I almost think of him as like a David Sedaris type person. If you're familiar with him, he's a humorist, and so like it's almost to that level. He might be. If Montaigne was here today, that might be who he is. Maybe he has been reincarnated.
That's what I was just about to say.
We don't know.
It's possible.
Yeah. And so he was coming up during this time where he also, like, the Reformation was happening. So this is where Protestantism is coming in. There's a lot of upheaval. Yeah. And one of the things that people really liked about him is because of all this upheaval, he felt a certain amount of freedom. And that's where these essays and this form of literary writing that he was doing came from, is he felt this sort of like nugget of initial humanism that was coming to happen at this time, where individuals were allowed to have completely new, different, outside of the norm, and more importantly, outside of the church, ideas about themselves, society, their friends, their family, whatever. And he was thriving in that.
Yeah.
He was like, oh, I got ideas. Yeah. I got them.
And let me write them down.
Okay. And on Friends, this is who he could be friends with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not his dad.
Yes. Not his father. Mm-hmm.
And why can't you?
Yeah. Well, so it's so interesting, right? The way that he says, here are examples of relationships that could not ever rise to the level of friendships because of different features about these kinds of relationships. So like parent-child relationships, he says, is one that is, of course, marked by a certain like power dynamic, right? Parents have a certain amount of say over, how things go in their children's lives, and children ought to obey their parents. And that's one way of showing respect for your parents. And so there's this natural disparity in the relationship, right? Like they're not equals. Parents and children are not equals. Parents are in charge of raising their children, not the other way around. Montaigne cites these possible contrary humors, right? Maybe there are certain kinds of like predispositions that a parent or a child has that makes them kind of like not the right fit for a friendship, right? Like you're just like, just like not every other person is capable of being friends because we are differently constituted. Yeah. And then of course a parent-child relationship is not reciprocal because it not the kind of reciprocity that's required for friendship, right? Because in friendships, you're helping to advise your friends on matters practical and personal, and that's just not the kind of thing that we see in parent-child relationships.
And sometimes you don't even want to tell your parents.
Yes.
You don't want to be who you really are. Yeah. You want to be who they want you to be in some aspect. I'm not saying this is I'm just saying maybe this is a type of friendship. I'm like, not in my case. Yeah. That's for sure. But other people that I've seen or read about. Fake people or people in the 16th century. So what about siblings?
Oh, yeah. So he gives the brother example.
Yep.
Right? And he says that brothers also can't be friends. Why? Well, they're in a sense competing. And we can wonder what they're competing for. Well, remember the time period that we're thinking about. The patrilineal transfers of wealth and estates, right? Like dad's stuff is going to go to, well, ideally the firstborn son, right? And so forth and so on from there. But you never know what happens, right? Dad could say of the first son, you've betrayed me, or you're not worthy of this, so it'll go to one of the other ones. Right. So in some sense, the brothers are constantly competing, and as Montaigne says, constantly hindering one another.
Right.
Trying to undermine the other person. And so obviously that kind of relationship is not one where a friendship blossoms if you're constantly trying to hinder the other person.
And even before it gets to the point, like we think of that maybe as an adulthood, but even before that, you're competing for attention. Like if you take this into a modern kind of, can you be friends as siblings? Getting attention. If you're into the same sport or activity, you might be competing for accolades in that thing against your sibling. And so, yeah, there is this competitive nature. And there's sibling love that is a type of love that doesn't exist anywhere else.
Exactly.
Like it is its own thing. But it can't be your bestie.
Yeah.
It can't be your friend.
Right. Yeah.
That's so now women.
Yeah. That's the fun one.
That's what we're here talking about today.
Yeah.
Can men and women be friends? So what does Montaigne have to say about that?
Well, so it's funny because it's like first he talks about friendship, right? Or he sort of makes the distinction between friendship or, friendship and then relationships with women, which automatically are like, oh, I see. Women are excluded from the category friendship.
Yeah, exactly. He's like separate.
Yeah, separate. And then it's also funny in the essay, he basically says, I'm paraphrasing, not to compare, but... and then totally goes on to compare.
Exactly.
He's basically like, well, with women, he's thinking about romantic relationships. Right. And he's thinking about the kind of dependency there too, right? Like that in a romantic relationship, in different directions, there can be a kind of dependency. Also remembering the 17th century, women were in many ways subservient to their husbands. Right. And so, in the best case scenario, you get a good husband, right? And he treats you with respect and so forth. But, right, this is just the natural sort of, it was presumed to be a natural ordering of things, right? That the husbands were the sort of head of the family in the way that like the king is the head of the commonwealth. Right. And so just thinking back to the parent-child relationship, there's a disparity there in the power dynamic. Same thing in marriage, right? Husbands have more power, more responsibility, and so forth than their wives. And so there's naturally a disparity in the power in the relationship. And so in that way, there's a kind of dependency. In another way, there's the kind of dependency of desire, like the lust and the pursuit of women as, right, like the objects of desire. Yeah. And so he says of relationships with women, loving relationships with women, it's active, eager, and more sharp even than friendship, but it's also, he says, fickle and moving, right? Like it can change at once. Right. And so it's really not a stable relationship, especially, right? It's not the kind of thing that is stable and like quiet and thoughtful. Centering and thoughtful. It's like the chase, right? The chase and the lust and the desire to have. Yep. And these features are just not the kinds of things that make for a good friendship. Right. And he even, I think, ends that thought with, and reproduction. Yes. Right. And then just like moves on. Yeah. He's like, and also reproduction. Right. You're like, okay. Yeah. And I mean, so in that case, there is the aspect of when you have a female relationship, and especially with Montaigne, I think that he had an arranged marriage even. Yeah. So there's this other aspect with him coming from the aristocracy or from a rich family where he is in this thing where almost your wife is chosen for you. Yeah, so not just women, but also the woman that you are going to be attached with for your whole life has all of these unchosen responsibilities and the main source of your connection is that you're supposed to be creating children. There's a job involved with you being together, and that is kind of the job of it, is to make sure that these children exist, which again changes the dynamic of how are you supposed to be friends with every time you go and see your in-laws, they're like, when's the baby? Like it makes it less like, yeah, but we also went and played mini golf and we also whatever.
So those are some things that he specifically mentions in the essay. But I think we want to elaborate a little bit more about what did it look like in the 1500s for men and women, even the concept of men and women coming together. Because again, we will be talking about people like Mary Estelle or like Wollstonecraft. Like, we are on the precipice of these, the inklings of these women thinkers coming about. But he is not a part of that time. In his time period, there are not really any famous. There are women like Clouquot who are coming up and starting to like be like, women can run a business, and everyone's like, what?
Yeah.
Women?
Yeah.
A business?
Those two things don't go together.
But like, if we think about that time period beyond just like him thinking about genders,
Yeah.
what maybe would have prevented men and women from being friends?
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of practical matters, just like time,
Right.
right? Like, friendship requires time to get to know your friend, to spend time with them, to be able to do things with them, whether that's like activities or just
Letters.
sitting around writing letters to each other if you're
Yep.
not in the same place. And so it seems like there's this practical question of like, who has the time for friendship?
Right.
And it seems like in a lot of these situations, especially when women are defined by roles having to do with the family or the household, and having to take care of these kinds of practical matters, there's just not the time to be able to sort of go into a quiet room and write down your letters to your friends, right? Get your thoughts out, read their letters, respond to their letters. I
Yeah.
mean, not to say that this was impossible or no women
Because
did
we
this.
know that, there were plenty of
course.
upper class women
For
who
sure.
had many hobbies and letter writing and all those things.
Absolutely.
But when you talk about time, females, even as they go into adolescence, are now a part of the household
Yes,
management
right.
and or are being prepared for marriage.
Yes.
So when you talk about do they even have time, there is that like, are they being in, because remember, let's talk about, he thinks you need intellect
Right.
to be able to
Yeah.
be a friends. Like,
Yeah.
and so and that intellect is not just memorizing thing, it's just knowledge. That is spending time taking knowledge and then creating ideas and nuances to that knowledge you've taken in. The women do not have time for this.
Yes.
They are being prepared for the marriage mart.
Yeah.
They are helping manage the household. They are milking the cow.
Yeah.
They are, just going through the class, like considering
sure.
what other
Different
different
classes.
classes might be doing. They're taking care of their other siblings. Like,
Right.
once you're the oldest,
Yeah. You're on mom duty.
You're on mom duty as like that starts to happen. You're not, so you don't have the time for it. But then also there's just not the intention put towards this.
For sure.
You're not given the same tutors that your brother's given.
Yes. Exactly.
You're not sent to the fancy finishing school.
Right. Yes.
You're not, or you might be sent to a fancy finishing school, but it is not a school. That's a school that is focused on, what is it called? Purportment? What is the word for
Comportment?
Comportment.
Comportment?
How you stand.
Yeah, right, yeah.
How you present yourself. How do you serve a glass of wine? Like,
Yeah. Maybe learning how to hand stitch and embroider
Yep.
and these sort of classically, right, what has been sort of relegated as like, this is what young girls learn to do. Like,
Right.
that's their education. Whereas young boys get the advantage of having an education that involves maybe doing this kind of, fine motor skill work, but also
Painting,
maybe painting. But they also learn arithmetic and how to read and how to speak different languages. And once again, it's not that no women were doing this. It's just that farther and fewer between.
oh,
right?
so few.
So few.
And it had to be of the means, of such
Exactly.
a crazy amount of means to be able to do this. Right.
Exactly. So yeah, so lacking the time because your day-to-day is preoccupied with all kinds of tasks that are necessary for keeping everybody going.
Right.
You know, like how
Society.
many people, society basically, right?
Right.
How many people depend on women successfully, you know, achieving their day-to-day goals. So they don't have the time for this. But also, if you're thinking in the way that Montaigne's thinking about, right, these things, in the sense of you need an intellect, and an intellect needs to be cultivated, and it's cultivated through education, and girls
Right.
don't get access to the education needed to cultivate the intellect.
Right.
Well, then it seems like, yeah, maybe, right, maybe it's a problem for friendship, right? But then, so now, I mean, you could critically evaluate Montaigne's take, and you could say, okay, he's operating in the context that he's in, right? Like, this is just the way things are. Maybe women, girls, they don't have the opportunity for education, and so they don't have the opportunity to cultivate the intellect, and so they're not a kind of, ideal choice for a friend.
Right. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean, now this is us going beyond what Montaigne's saying. Like, that doesn't mean women are by nature incapable of this.
Right. They're just not given the opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we'll go on to explore others, right? Like Astle,
Later.
who has to say something about, about all this, and arguing at the core of it that women should be educated, not only capable of friendship, right? Yeah.
They're actually better at it.
They're really, really good.
So with all of that said, when Montaigne is like, you can't be friends with women, part of this is because his definition of a friend is so strict.
Yeah.
So we previously talked about friends of virtue. So this is already a very small group. We've talked about, like the indifference towards friends. So like making your life such, which Montaigne loved the Stoics.
Yeah.
So a lot of when he's like quoting things or a lot of his ideas, he really does do a lot of throwbacks to both skepticism. He is really famously one of the people who actually brought skepticism back to Europe because of his translations and his popularity with quoting them and all of these ideas. So he really loved those kinds of ideas. But he was like, I'm going to go even stricter. And I'm going to say that a true friend, you might have one. And it's almost like finding a soulmate. The idea, I think he uses I don't know how someone translates. I've only read it
In English.
So
Yeah.
they refer to it as a soulmate.
Right.
But he had this one friend that in his essay, so on friendship, that whole essay, he's discussing the one specific friend who he believed was not only his truest friend and thus the example that all friendships should strive for, but also that this was his soulmate. And once he died, he was like, I am unlikely to ever find that again. That's something that is so special. So for him, what friendship had to include was what we think of as romantic love.
Yeah.
Almost. Like when I read about all of his thoughts on friendship, it is I think he calls it an obsession.
Yeah.
You are obsessed with either being with that person, communicating with that person, receiving word from that person, facilitating things that they would enjoy. When you see something they would like, they're the first thought in your mind.
Yeah.
Like, to me, those descriptions sound very romantic.
Totally. Yeah, for sure.
But on top of that, he only thought that was possible between two men.
Yes.
And so to take it into modern terms and the way that, because we can't really, although in his essay, he does discuss, like, if we were in ancient Greece, this would include some kind of sexual behavior.
Yeah.
But there's not a way in modern times to do a comparison of this, because not only in the essay does he say society right now in the 1500s does not allow for this,
Right.
but I can know that if we were 1600 years ago, there would be this physical part of it. We can't really take those ideas and bring them into the 21st century because we have such a different idea about genders and sexuality and what all that means. And even then he was like, I can say this, but I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
That's not what our relationship is.
Right.
But in these ancient times, there were sexual relationships between what you would consider like mentor and mentee or friends or whatever, or there was a physical aspect to it. But this is the level that he thought of that friend, right? So in modern times, we say like there's bromances.
Right.
Like bromance being like this idea that there are dudes that are just like love each other so much that they are like the pinnacle of, this would be his idea of friendship, the bromance. The bromance.
Yeah.
Which I don't think has to exclude women in this case.
Yeah.
For modern, if we're taking Montaigne, his ideas of friendship and saying, what does that look like in modern times? This is when we opened up the episode with like, we're unusual in this fact because our romantic relationships are with who we would consider our best friends.
Yeah, totally.
Because we are obsessed with them.
Yes, we really are.
I'm not a stalker of my husband.
But
kind of.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, when we talk about that, now that it's so different, when we talk about sexuality and gender and all that kind of stuff, and we take Montaigne's ideas on friendship, I do think that this romantic idea, because we can't, if you look back on it, people want to be like, well, they were homosexual.
Right.
But that's not.
It's not what it was.
It's not what society, we
Yeah.
can't say what their thoughts were. We can't say what their feelings were. But we can take his ideas of friendship and say, in modern times, you can feel that, and that can be who you marry.
Yeah.
It's like marriage met friendship.
Yes.
In these ideas. When you take out the gendered part. It'd be really fun to read his essay if all gender was taken out. If like you could look at it as completely gender neutral.
Yeah. And what would we learn? Yeah, what would we learn from that by sort of abstracting all of these, other kind of, I don't know, you might think contingent features.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ideas of it. But I mean, that is for another person.
For sure.
Who wants to translate his original French.
Sure. Yes.
Also wants to go back and maybe translate some of the Latin and Greek.
That would be so nice. Have at it. Here's our P.O. box.
Where are you? Please do at me.
Do at me.
With these things. So for this week's thought experiment, I'm hoping that we can look at this idea of kind of why is there this gendered friend conversation that's been happening for hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe all of eternity. Why has that been happening? And part of that thought experiment is I just want you to consider, has there ever been a friendship that you gave up on or just didn't invest in for any reason because of gendered reasons? And so one of those might be activities. Like you might be like, for me, I'm female, so just thinking about males, like, I have great conversations with this dude. Like, it's really fun. His only really hangout time is centered around like cars, like restoring old cars or like going motorcycle rides or something that, and on the opposite side, if you're not very girly, like maybe you don't like shopping that much.
Right.
Maybe you don't like hang out with people and do makeup tutorials.
Right.
But have those sort of things prevented you on what could potentially be one of the greatest friendships ever just because you have this presumption of like, as this gender, I'm not into that thing.
Right.
Or the other side of that, another way to think about it is society's expectations around gendered relationships stopped you from investing in those relationships. So the idea of a romantic, like, can you be friends without it becoming romantic?
Right. Or like really what it is a friendship. The friendship is the guise for what you ultimately want, which is this romantic thing, which makes it feel complicated, right? Or
Right.
Instead of even dealing with all that, you just sort of are reclusive about it in the first place. You're like, I just don't want to deal with, in one way or another, people thinking that I'm leading this person on, or,
Yeah.
I don't want to be labeled as that broad who's always friend zoning people, where
Right.
it's like, the friendship was the whole point.
Yeah, you're like,
begin
actually, I
with.
was friend zoning them because what I wanted was
Friendship.
friendship. So, but there's kind of an expectation around it in society. So, take this kind of idea. Have you ever experienced it? Or if you want to get really wild, just because you can't consider what your own outings might be, if you want to go and invest some time and effort into one of these activities, just to see, like, is that what has guardrailed me from having this kind of bigger, better, more influential in my life kind of friendship?
And in a good case, you find a friendship that's blossoming, and you pursue that. And in the best case, you're like, dang, I really like restoring old cars. Who knows?
Who knows? I would like to go ahead and thank Tyler Olson for doing our recording and chatting with us, unlimited chats. Samantha Fisher for her our opening credits and our songs. Jennifer Lockhart for conversations that kind of help me contemplate this subject in particular. And to you, the listener, thank you so much for tuning in. And for this week, I'd like to say from Montaigne himself, I know that the arms of friendship are long enough to reach from one end of the world to the other.
That's so beautiful.
I know.
Why can't we be friends?
Why can't we be friends?
Why can't we be?
Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye.